Yabba dabba do, U.S. history. Okay, today kind of a fun lesson for you where we're trying to get into more like pop culture stuff because I know in U.S. history class, I mean, we focus on like big movements like the women's suffrage movement or civil rights or wars like World War II and Vietnam. And we cover like big figures, that are presidents or guys like Martin Luther King. Well, anyway, a lot of that stuff is very important history that we need to cover, and that should be the backbone of the class. But I think a lot of times it gives us a real negative view, and everything seems down and dreary, and man, like hard times all the way through. When in actuality, most Americans over the last 100 years have enjoyed a pretty high standard of living and have experienced some really awesome cultural stuff in their day-to-day lives. Well, by the 1960s, everybody has a TV in their house. Not everybody, but most families do. That technology had been around for 15, 20 years since like the 1940s and World War II era, but now it's being manufactured and it's cheap enough that most people have a television set in their in their living room. Okay, most TVs on average had one TV in the house back in the 60s, and people are fascinated by it. They love this new medium and of communication and getting your news. So people increasingly start to get their news from nightly news shows. And we're also watching, and you don't have a ton of choices. There's three main networks that most Americans have access to: ABC, NBC, and CBS. If you're in a big city, maybe you have a few more networks, a few more things to dial into. Well, people love to tune into the different networks and they want to be entertained too. So you see sitcoms starting to come out, little situation comedies. And another thing that has been around for a while, but it starts to catch on TV is animated cartoons. Okay. Now, most of you, I would imagine, have heard of the Flintstones. That was my yabba dabba do intro there. That series is one of the most famous and easily recognizable cartoons in American and world history. Did you know, though, that the Flintstones, they were the first cartoon to get a network primetime spot in the lineup, and it was on TV from 1960 to 1965. I think it was a 6-season run, and then, of course, in the decades that have followed, it's been put into syndication, and you can still watch those episodes and you'll catch it on reruns. And they've done more modern takes on the Flintstones and made movies out of it and all that. The franchise has been wildly successful. Anyway, I think the Flintstones is kind of interesting, and it really has even though it's set in the Stone Age, it has a very 1960s feel. You can get a lot from the culture and what was going on in the country by watching like some episodes of the Flintstones. And it's of course intended to be a comedy. It's for kids, but it also is designed, being in a primetime spot like that, to appeal to adults too. So hopefully you like some of the little clips that I've attached to this post. You don't necessarily have to watch all of them all the way through, but I think you should check them out. And if you're curious about it, go find some Flintstones episodes out there, or go get on YouTube and look up some of the greatest hits reels. So I think it's kind of a fun cultural thing for us to do here. And I will do this week's Q&A assignment will probably tie into this and some of the other television and cartoon related things that I'm going to be throwing at you from this era. But this is the first one that I'm doing that's like a cartoon, as it was the first cartoon to get a primetime spot and really kind of make a splash and become a huge American, success on television. The last clip that I attached here, I want to explain it a little bit, and this will it kind of blew my mind when I saw this for the first time. But then thinking back to what I know about the '60s and this era in history, it makes sense that the last attachment I put on here, it's a black and white one because most television sets were black and white, even though they were actually, the animation was in color. Anyway, you have Fred and Barney, and they're doing an advertisement, that's kind of weird too, because today commercials are separate from like the actors or the sitcom or whatever program you're watching. But back then it was very common for, in this case, cartoon characters, or like if you were watching an actual show with real actors, for the actors to do an advertisement for one of their sponsors, like, oh, delicious Coca-Cola, go crack one and, drink that down. It's so refreshing, something like that. Well, one of the sponsors for the Flintstones program in the early seasons was Winston cigarettes. And you see Fred and Barney doing an ad where they're puffing on Winston cigarettes and like avoiding doing some household chores or something like that. And I was like, man, that struck me as so bizarre. And I'd imagine it'd be bizarre to you guys too, because today, cigarette and tobacco companies are not even allowed to advertise on TV because we don't want that getting directed to kids and getting them hooked on it. And then I think it's especially egregious that it's a cartoon show that is kind of designed to appeal to kids, and you got the main characters smoking cigarettes and endorsing a certain brand of tobacco there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Don't take it as I'm promoting Winston cigarettes. I'm not doing that at all. But I included that one on there too because I thought, man, that really shows how different the world was back then. Just a different time. And then I think most people by 1960 could have probably guessed that cigarettes and smoking tobacco was not a real healthy thing to do. But the Surgeon General's report linking it to lung cancer had not come out yet. So it wasn't as taboo to promote cigarettes back then. And it was way more common for Americans to smoke back in that era. Okay, that's all I got for you on this, a little intro to the Flintstones. Go ahead and check out some of the clips that I also have attached to this post, and I hope you enjoy them. See ya.